get more on that story for you now with Stephen Nash from FIIG Securities. Stephen, nice to talk to you. Let's talk about just where the banks now find themselves on the global stage. Where are those spreads sitting when it comes to lending?
Well, in terms of wholesale markets, the funding levels have been fairly stable for a while now, but as you mentioned, the competition in global markets is intensifying. Sovereign yields rising, and then that's bringing bank yields up as well. So one can anticipate as that competition increases that wholesale spreads may move out, and some of the banks have been looking to fund fairly soon to get in front of that. I think that that's a concern in terms of the outlook, but in terms of spreads, they've been fairly stable. But the problem for the banks is just the average cost of funds going up as old borrowings roll off. It's inevitable that the average cost of funds goes up.
Stephen, how does this feed through though into critically the lending at the end of the day for consumers? Because if you look at numbers even out of Wall Street, you can obviously cling on to weakness as exhibited by, for instance, revenue. That part of the equation looking a bit shaky. But if you also though look at credit itself, that seems to be improving. If companies feel better about their balance sheets, if they start lending, that's got to be better, not just for the economy, but for the sector itself.
Look, some of the comments from some of the banks from the US are probably a little bit optimistic. One could call them even delusional to some extent, in the sense that they're talking about a return to normality. Now, the US economy is anything but normal right now. We've had low rates for a very long period of time. The improvement in non-performing loans is really not that good. What we really need now is a growth in revenues from underlying economic growth. And I think we really need that now, and we need it fairly soon, because the US is running out of time in terms of limits on its debt. They are approaching a time where they will have to reduce fiscal stimulation, and that will have implications for growth.
And yet the markets seem to be able to go on for now to say, well, we'll just put that issue to the side. When do markets actually start focusing on that issue and reacting to it?
Well, I think it won't be too far off. I think if you look at what's been happening from the White House of late, I think you've had a few announcements. The first was the tax deal, a bow to the Republicans. I think the second was the speech in Tucson to the victims there, where Obama didn't take the partisan line. He really included everyone and didn't attack Republicans. And recently they've put out an executive order trying to reduce the burden of regulation on business. Now, I think that's pointing to a move to the centre and maybe some more, I suppose, right-wing policies, and that may, I think, also mean some sort of fiscal tightening coming up. A review of spending, I think, is on the cards here.
Is this also a precedent that is with this state visit from China's premier? It's almost this much more seductively tempting route down the foreign policy dimension, rather than addressing problems at home. Could he go the way of LBJ and friends and become, if anything, known for his foreign policy dalliances and not addressing issues at home?
Oh, look, I think, you know, after the election result late last year, there's been a change in the Obama administration. It's much more trying to take back the centre ground, and I think they're going to pursue both very aggressively. I think the domestic issues will be addressed, and there's a lot of spending reviews that have got to take place. I think they could possibly trim spending without affecting employment that much. They've got to do an effectiveness review and make sure that the spending cuts don't affect employment. It's going to be difficult, but I think that's the tack they're going to take. On the foreign side, I think that's obviously very important. The currency issue with the Chinese is being pursued, and I think it makes sense for the Chinese to allow some appreciation given food prices there.
Stephen, just bringing it finally back to the banks, I think we've only got a few minutes left with you, but in terms of the banks and the regional building societies, as time goes on, how are you digesting the kind of impact of the floods on them?
Well, we'd anticipate that there's going to be some elevation in delinquencies. That might flow through to some of the RMBS pools, but we don't expect anything major in terms of delinquencies. It basically, in the next 3 to 6 months, expect those 90-day arrears to go up slightly. It may, the effect on the smaller institutions may be more impetus to merge may increase the already existing tendencies to get better scale. I think that makes sense, and the floods probably just push that along a little bit.
All right, Stephen, that one's going to be a talking point in coming weeks, of course. For now, I've got to leave it. Many thanks.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
Stephen Nash.